All right. Well, welcome everyone to this special live edition of Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor, and made possible by the support of listeners like you. My name is Maximillian Alvarez. I'm the editor-in-chief here at The Real News, and I am also the host of Working People. And it is my great honor to welcome all of you and our incredible panel to the Real News Network here in downtown Baltimore. So, who here has heard of the Real News before? Raise your hand. Okay, sweet. Who here is here for the first time? Raise your hand. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for making time to come out and chat with us on a Thursday evening. Who wants to talk about fighting the boss and building worker power? Raise your hand. Hell yeah. I guess for everyone on the live stream, all hands were raised. That's really what we're here to talk about tonight, and that's really one of our key areas of focus at the Real News Network. So I just wanted to say a few words about the Real News and the work that we do. We are a independent, nonprofit, multimedia network. We produce original YouTube shows, podcasts, and text reports every week. We basically lift up the voices and report on the struggles of people on the front lines of the fight for a better world. People fighting to improve their workplaces and their neighborhoods. People fighting against the systematic abuses of the police and prison industrial complexes. People fighting for peace and an end to endless war. People fighting for democracy and a livable planet. And as my colleague Mansa Musa, who himself was locked up as a political prisoner for 48 years, recently told me, the Real News gives volume to the voiceless. Unlike corporate media, we are here to serve the people, not the powerful. Working people in Baltimore and beyond deserve a better kind of media, and we are honored to be working alongside other great journalists and independent media outlets that are working overtime to deliver on that promise. We are here for you. This is your space. So please, tonight and beyond, use it. Let us know if there are ways that we can make this space more usable for you, your neighbors, and your community. And these stories are our stories, and these fights are all of our fights, right? That's the kind of work that we do here, right? We don't believe that journalism was ever objective. We believe that you can apply the tools of rigorous principled journalism to the struggles that matter to you and to the community that you're a part of. And that is what we try to do every single week here at The Real News and on the Working People podcast. And, speaking of fights, speaking of struggle, we are living through a really exciting moment of struggle. Right? Obviously, the obstacles that we face, the pressures that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are numerous and imposing, right? We understand that the stakes of our struggles are incredibly high, whether those are struggles against the attacks on democracy, the fascistic attacks on teachers, queer people, trans people, immigrants, right? The attacks on our shared planet, the attacks on workers and our coworkers and all of us who are just trying our best to get by, right? And amidst these intensifying pressures, amidst increasing war and climate chaos and corporate pillage, we are seeing working people stand up and fight back, right? And not just here in Baltimore, but across the country and beyond. As we speak, there are strikes all across France and the United Kingdom, which we also covered here at the Real News Network. We have, in just the past year or two alone, we have spoken with workers who are unionizing or going on strike in industries across the board, from strippers in North Hollywood who just won their union this week. Shout out to Strike Strippers No Ho. Kellogg's workers who went on strike, Amazon workers who were trying to unionize, striking journalists at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, striking performers at Medieval Times, striking teachers in Minneapolis and beyond, healthcare workers across the board. And we've also really dug in and tried to cover the incredible struggles happening right here in our hometown of Baltimore, including struggles that you're going to hear about in depth by our great panelists here tonight. But we've reported on the unionization efforts at Starbucks, the Baltimore Museum of Art winning their union, workers at the Enoch Pratt Free Library winning their union, moms workers at the grocery store in Hamden and Timonium winning their union, Johns Hopkins graduate student workers, hospitality workers with Unite Here Local 7 fighting the good fight. You know, this is, I think, a really, really beautiful example of, you know, the fighting spirit of Baltimore. And Baltimore is a union town, right? I mean, we have such a storied history here. The National Labor Union was founded here in 1866. That was the first attempt at a national labor group, and they were fighting for the 8-hour workday, a demand that decades later would come to be realized. But this is also where the Caulkers Association was formed in 1838, one of the first black trade unions in the country. And one of their most famous members was Frederick Douglass, right? But as we have seen across the country, there's been a decline in organized labor power over the years. Union density in Baltimore, in Maryland, like across the country, has been declining for the past half century. And with that has come, you know, the unleashing of social ills and you know, all the sort of attacks on working people's livelihoods and dignity that unions are there to protect against, right? We are all working harder and longer while the cost of living continues to squeeze us, while all of that excess productivity is being siphoned out of our city into the pockets of Wall Street shareholders and traders and wealthy developers and executives, so on and so forth. So this is what we're up against, and we wanted to bring everyone here together tonight to hear firsthand from the incredible worker organizers across industries in the city who are banding together with their coworkers and saying enough is enough, we deserve better, and we're gonna prove it. And so tonight we are going to hear about their incredible struggles, and most importantly, we are going to talk about how all of us can better support those struggles, what stake we all have, and what we can do to ensure that this labor movement grows in our city, that working people win their struggles, and that more working people get brought into the fight and feel supported and take back the power that has been stolen from us. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Again, I couldn't be more honored to be joined by my incredible panelists and my co-hosts, who's going to introduce herself in 1 second. But I just once again wanted to thank all of you for coming to the Real News Network tonight. Wanted to give a big shout out to our whole crew that's working behind the scenes to live stream this event, record this event. And I want to also say hello to everyone who is watching this live stream right now on YouTube. So with all of that, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to toss things over to my incredible, intrepid co-host, the great Rebekah Kirkman. Rebekah, introduce yourself to the good audience.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, everybody, including especially our awesome panelists. My name is Rebekah Kirkman. I'm a writer and editor in Baltimore, and I have been reporting on local labor organizing in the city for the past couple of years, primarily looking at cultural institutions. And my background is actually as an artist and art critic, and journalist. So I've kind of come into this realm of labor reporting, first as a member of an arts community. And throughout all of this work that I've done in just writing about local arts and local community efforts, I think a major theme that I've been interested in is generally like, how do people connect with each other, and how do people form community, and what are the things that get in the way of their community, of their participating in community. It's really hard, for example, to feel like you have a community if you're working 2 jobs because your first full-time job doesn't pay you enough at the museum. So that's kind of like the overarching theme, I think, of a lot of the work that I've done that I'm interested in. And I'm also, I've also noticed just like all of this organizing in the context of Baltimore, which Max just gave a great intro of its like labor history. But for me, having lived in Baltimore for about 13 years, it's very much a place where people make things happen here, especially when like the institutions and powers that be kind of mess things up or make things harder for everybody. There's always people, I find, responding and trying to kind of fill in gaps where it's needed. So with all of that in mind, I would love to start our first question for the panelists. So just kind of try to give the audience a quick rundown of your union campaign. Introduce yourself, your name, and where you work and what your union is. Tell us how you personally got involved in this fight, and what are some of the issues you're organizing around?
Absolutely. Hi, thank you. My name is Rachel Leeds. I work at the Walters Art Museum, and I'm on the organizing committee of Walters Workers United. With my role, I'm an accessibility advocate, so I work to make the museum more accessible for visitors across the disability and ability spectrums. I started in I'm so bad at time. I started in 2022, and actually the union had been going on since 2020. So I came in midway through the struggle. So now I'm like, did I start in 2021? Anyways, but so they'd already been organizing for around a year, and I wasn't there, but I can share what I heard when I started from my coworkers about why they were organizing. And a lot of it, like the breaking point was both the pandemic and all of the racial justice initiatives that were happening as a result of the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and that sort of movement that was happening at that time and is continuing to happen now. And workers who were on the front lines, security, visitor experience, were being exposed to COVID and weren't getting any hazard pay. They were not able to, they were struggling to afford rent and supplies and that type of thing. There wasn't protection that was provided. And in addition to that, there was a incident where during some type of construction or maintenance, there were vapors that were emerging from an area, and some people got sick and had to go home. And that was very, very scary for a lot of people. And so out of all of those things, a lot of organizing started. WWU kind of formed and tried to get an election agreement. That did not happen. And it was basically a 2-year-long struggle that I joined halfway through it to get to where we are now with having an election agreement and having an election that will be happening on June 15th. My personal sort of reasons for joining, at first it was just hearing all of the things that I just said from my coworkers and just standing by that and listening to that and wanting to be part of supporting. In addition to that, the Walters has very strong like diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion goals that it promotes for visitors and just sort of throughout the institution as a whole. And my specific job is focusing on the accessibility side of things. And with all of that work that is happening, unionizing and making sure that workers have a say in the situations that affect them and the policies that affect them really felt in line with the work that we were already doing. So I joined and I got involved, and I've personally had some experiences where I felt like I didn't have a voice or I didn't have recourse. And unionization felt like a good way of addressing that, and just having the support from the fellow members of Walters Workers United was really helpful. And now we're at a place where we were able to get an election agreement signed, and that is very exciting. And we've basically been acting as a union for 2 years. Without official recognition, and we're excited to get official recognition. So that's backstory.
Hey, my name is Andre Eldridge. I work at the Marriott Waterfront. I'm a shop steward there. I'm also on the committee with Unite Here, Local 7. We first won our union, and it was May 2018. And it was an ugly fight, like a real ugly fight we had. As a matter of fact, we didn't even get our first contract, didn't get ratified until February 2021. And because as soon as we won the union, not too far after that, then COVID hit. So we had to negotiate through COVID. And that was kind of rough because we had to do workarounds. Then, during the time, we can only get a year. We did a 1-year contract because the company complained they wasn't getting no business. It's things that we had to pull off of that we wanted. So everybody agreed on the 1-year contract, which ended February 2022. That was last year. So right now, we're negotiating our new contract, and this would be a full contract because right now we're $1.50 behind the other shops, the Hilton, the Hyatt, all the other shops that Unite Here is at. And so right now, and that's a big fight we have. Tomorrow, we're going to be picketing tomorrow at Marriott Waterfront tomorrow at 3 o'clock, if anybody want to join us in the fight. And for me, my reason, for really getting in and really fighting, at first it was like a no-brainer. My father got me the job down there. I hated it because I came from construction. So I just hated it. This hospitality thing, it wasn't for me. I hated every day of it. And so I just struggled through it. And then my father called me one day, like, the union coming. I said, all right, that's what's up. And I didn't really think much of it. And they came, and then a week or two later, you could hear them outside chanting. They pick it in, then they started leafleting. It probably was like, I was the same thing with her. I got in, it was probably about months after the fact, because I worked PM. So a lot of their scheduling didn't align. Like when they wanted to do fights and stuff, it didn't align with my schedule. But once I got in, one of the organizers got me, and he trained me. Like, he just took a liking to me, and he trained me and showed me everything. And he showed me, like, during COVID, when we was out, we actually did work for 2 months in Arizona for Joe Biden and Mark Kelly. And we was able to win out there and help those folks in Arizona win that big election out there. So at that time, I was training to be a shop steward. So once we was able to come back in the building, we were, I was sharp. We did that, came home for about 3 weeks. They called us back. We need y'all again. They sent us down to Atlanta, Georgia, where we helped Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff, and we won that one too. So it was beautiful. And we also had people in Pennsylvania, Florida, and other states like that. So a lot of that for me was like training, but it showed me a lot, like just being and talking with folks and like some of our brothers and sisters from other locals around the country. Unite Here, it's a big union.
Well, I just wanted to even that's being modest because I don't think any union suffered as many job losses and furloughs as Unite Here, because obviously hospitality during COVID, no one's staying in hotels. So I think your union suffered more job losses during COVID, and yet Unite Here did more door knocking than any other Democratic
thanks.
aligned institution in 2020 and 2022. So
Yeah.
that's a hell of an effort from you guys.
Thanks a lot. And that was in the middle of the pandemic. So, yeah. And like I said, it was hard, but I loved it because I never had that experience before. And just the satisfaction to be able to help folks to save their jobs. Like I said, I'm a shop store, and I see folks crying, coming to me with tears in their eyes. I just got rolled up. They're trying to fire me. And I got to take them with me. I got to make phone calls and things like that. So that's the beauty of it for me, just that part right there. Like, that's the beauty. Now, let y'all go.
So my name is Leela Grothy, and I work at the Baltimore Museum of Art, and we are organized with AFSCME. And also, I guess like both of you, the effort was underway when I first started at the BMA. So I started at the BMA in November of 2019, and I'm going to say 6 months of secret underground efforts were underway to sort of talk, and so that predates COVID. And I think the issues at the BMA were the same that so many cultural institutions are experiencing across the nation. Cultural institutions are unionizing, and it's because we have been so underpaid for so long. It's an exploitative industry that takes and doesn't really pay for it. So folks are starting to recognize that there is a way that we actually can have a voice, and that a united, empowered workforce really does. It makes for a healthier work environment. I mean, I have to just confess that I will be pro-union anytime, even in the most like blissful, utopic work environment. I'm like, great, let's unionize, So I just think that they benefit the institution and or the organization, the workplace, what have you. And at the BMA in particular, there were some folks who had been working there for 20 years and had never had any raise other than the occasional cost of living, no title increase, lots of stuff like that. And you just kind of, it's an erosion. You just slowly start to see things taken away. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually so that folks just kind of suddenly wake up like, wait a second, we used to not have to pay for our parking or any of the other things. And so we were able to, it was a long fight to get to the vote, not as long as the Walters, but it was a long fight to get to the vote. And we went public with management in September of 21, and we struggled to get to the vote. We've had a really meaningful meeting with our then director, Christopher Bedford, in, I think it was March of 22, and really sort of pushed and pressured, why is it that you're not letting us get a wall-to-wall union? And this is something that we also recognize from other arts organizations that don't have wall-to-wall unions. As a way of trying to save money, institutions will, for example, start contracting out your security staff or start contracting out your facility staff. And this is really specialized skill. These are people that know how visitors, for example, would interact with that one particular artwork because they've seen over the years that work, everyone gets real touchy around that one. Or people that know how to clean around that one artwork. I mean, we need these good people that have experience in the jobs. Anyway, so we argued really hard for the wall-to-wall union, got it, and went to our vote in July of 22. Does anyone else not remember years anymore from COVID? It's ridiculous. Like, why are we not over this? Anyway, but so in 22, we got our vote, and we won 89-29, and it was in a moment when a lot of people were on holiday as well, so great win. And now we're organizing, we're arguing, we're bargaining for our first contract, and I'm on the team for that. And it's great. We're meeting regularly. Hopefully we'll start meeting even more regularly, but so far we've managed to sign some provisional agreements with management where some of our workers are, standing for at times 12 hours at a time in the same spot. with no mats even, or even better seating. And so we're working on getting that for the guards. We've got some serious accessibility issues also, where some folks have not been able to keep their canes and like devices that they need for stability in the workplace, and they have to surrender those at the start of their shift. So we're starting to talk about things like this in the interim, while we start to also negotiate for having regular cost of living increases, which is not a standard practice, and actually having meaningful wages that might get us up to a living wage, so that most of my colleagues are not working 2 jobs at once, or sometimes more. Yeah, so that's what we're up to.
Hi, I'm Martin Yepes, Martin professionally. I do my research at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and I'm a grad worker. My ID badge says student, but I'm done taking classes. It's just lab work for me, for as long as it takes to graduate with a tight-knit group of people working in the same lab. And I can talk more about like the particularities of the job later, but as to the struggle question, yeah, I've always been a person that thinks that unions are a good idea. I wish I could say that as soon as I joined, what I wanted to do was unionize Hopkins, but that's not true. What it was is just reality. COVID hit, inflation was really bad, my rent went up, and my stipend didn't. And a lot of other people were in the same situation. If you are just at a living wage, it feels one way. If you're just a little bit below it, it feels very, very different. I joined in July of last year, almost said 2022 again. True Teachers and Researchers United, I'm on the contract action team, has existed in some form since 2018. A lot of diehard people from that phase of it are still very much involved. I had the luck to join as the momentum was starting to pick up, because what we need was all really common sense things. When we go to work, we need to be picked up by a bus that gets there on time. When we get dropped off, we need to work in a building that is clean and safe to work in. For the amount of time that we're there, we need that work to have dignity. And if we ever lose that dignity, we need some kind of procedure to fall back on to get it back. When we get home, we need to be able to pay our bills. And it's all, talking to more and more people with more and more problems, it seemed obvious that we all needed these things. That made unionizing seem like a good idea, sort of in theory, but as to why people would be motivated to like talk to their coworkers, bring the message out. When you say things like, I'm not getting paid enough to live, my savings are going away, I'm getting paid late, I can't get groceries this month. Sometimes in my little tribe, you hear, you should just be grateful that you're working at an institution this prestigious. You should just be grateful that you can do your studies here. What you do is not a job, it's a calling. Well, my landlord's calling, and I can't pay him in prestige, right? I can't pay him in prestige. And even if that's the case, why do some programs make enough to live? And why do some get paid $25,000 a year in a city where the cost of living is 38? If we've all got the same calling, why is it that the graduate students who do already have unions are getting a better deal, right? It's not just about the money, it's about the power, and we've got more of it than we think, right? So what that looked like was having that conversation over and over and over again with people in different labs. Sometimes it was people that you were already friends with. Sometimes it was perfect strangers that you turned out you had something in common with. We dropped cards in October. We got a majority within 2 weeks. We filed for an election. We got one January of this year. We turned out 64% of our bargaining unit in person over 2 days, and we won with a margin of 97%. Wow. So I still organize. I still talk to people. That's my main job on the contract action team. Someone from bargaining couldn't be here today because today was our second bargaining session with the administration. They had other stuff to do, right? And when it started for me, this was a couple people meeting in the basement of the building every 2 weeks, and now students are sitting across the table from the administration, not on completely equal terms yet, but not begging either, bargaining. So it feels pretty great. We're starting to get some resistance now, but I can talk about that later. And I'm really happy to be here.
My name is Deborah Cunningham. I work at the Moms in Hamden. I have been at Mom since October 2019. I started there as a regular grocery team member in the regular generalist pool. I now work mostly in produce, and over that amount of time, I have seen and experienced a lot that informed my decision to support the union, and also many of my coworkers' decision to support the union, especially with the pandemic. It drastically changed our lives and the environment we were working in as frontline workers, and dealing with pretty horrendous conditions and treatment from the company as a whole, who did not really have any kind of COVID policy for at least a month or more into the pandemic. And we're working under really extreme conditions. I worked like 8-hour shifts on register all day, nearly went insane most of the time because of just combined stress. I also was a full-time student at UMBC, and like eventually I think enough was enough for us, and we also really wanted to be treated like we are worth the work we do. Without us, society could not have survived the pandemic the way it did. You can't survive without grocery stores unless you're prepared to be a farmer. Yeah. We are really lucky to live in a society where some people can work to sustain one job, other people can do other jobs. But we know best as grocery store workers the precarity of our labor and how society views our labor. And our labor is not viewed as worthwhile as other labor. And we know that we have the right to ask to be treated like our labor is worthwhile, especially in the midst of being talked about how valuable we are as people during a pandemic and not getting paid anything near that. I started when I was first hired probably about $12 an hour, and they raised everyone within a couple of months to $14 an hour, solely because Trader Joe's did that. But Trader Joe's raised them to 15, I believe. Moms, for arbitrary reasons, decided that 14 was enough because our benefits, in addition, equal that. That's still their stance. right now, they have a big giant sign bragging about how they pay us $20 an hour because our benefits somehow add up to that. Meanwhile, most of us are trapped in this job. I'm trapped in this job because it's impossible to get another job right now. I make $16.50 an hour, and I can barely make expenses each month, and only able to buy, essentially still living with my parents, because I can't afford to live anywhere else, and I don't have the energy capacity as someone who is neurodivergent to work 2 jobs and not just like collapse into the ground when my job is already extremely physically labor intensive.
Yeah, let's give it up. Man, I mean, I'm just so in awe of all of you, right? And your incredible and important struggles, and you know, they're definitely not easy, right? I mean, that's why we call them struggles, right? I mean, if this was easy, I think a lot more people would do it. But you know, it really, really is inspiring to hear how amidst, you know, these conditions that y'all were working under, amidst, you know, world-changing events like COVID, right? Along with just like a deeply embedded anti-labor, anti-worker culture in the United States that seeps into our own brains, and we tell ourselves, well, we don't deserve better, right? Or if we organize with our coworkers and demand better, we're being ungrateful, like y'all said, right? Or if you don't like it, just quit and go somewhere else, right? I mean, this is the stuff that's beaten into our heads from birth. And so even just going up against that, bucking that common wisdom and saying, no, there's a different way to do things is an incredibly brave and heroic thing to do, right? And yeah, I think it's something that we should all support for many reasons. One, organizing at your job is your right in this country. And yet it's one of the rights that we ostensibly have that if you want to exercise that right, you got to go through like a Lord of the Rings style saga, where you could get fired, your coworkers could get fired, you could get descheduled, lose your health care.
Your whole entire newspaper can get shut down after unionizing, like the city paper where I used to work did.
Yeah. Hypothetically, right? You know?
Yeah, hypothetically, legit.
Yeah, or like Starbucks. We were hoping to have a member of Starbucks Workers United join us on the panel tonight, who unfortunately couldn't be here, but we've reported on that struggle in Baltimore and beyond as well. The Charles Street store was the first Starbucks store in Maryland that voted to unionize. Shout out to them. But we've seen what Starbucks is doing. No Starbucks store that is voted to unionize has a contract yet, right? And in fact, a lot of stores where workers have voted and they have expressed their democratic right to vote to unionize, Starbucks closed their stores, right? They closed all 3 union stores in Ithaca, New York. There's now no Starbucks in Ithaca, right? They closed the Seattle Roastery. They've closed stores in New York, DC, right? The deck is so stacked in favor of the bosses, which again is why it's so inspiring to see working people banding together with their coworkers and fight for something better, to believe in our worth, right? And to fight for that. But it's also why it is so damn important for all of us to recognize that we have a stake in the outcome of this story. Right? The labor movement is never over, right? As the great labor organizer Cooper Caraway once told me on this very show, it's one of my favorite quotes from the show. He said, you know, the labor movement didn't begin the first time a group of workers sat down in a hall and called themselves the Amalgamated Bricklayers, right? He said, from the moment one human being had to serve another to survive, the labor movement was born. Right? And as long as that dynamic exists, the labor movement lives on, right? And the struggle very much continues. And I think that one of the really important things that I'm hearing from all of you, and that I want to kind of toss things back to the panel to address in the second half of this discussion is like, how can we support that? As a labor movement, how can like our respective struggles do better to support each other, learn from each other, show up for each other, right? I mean, we're seeing examples of solidarity that are, I think, really powerful and really beautiful. The Real News Network is a proud union shop, right? We, our staff are members of the Washington Baltimore News Guild. And as we all know, Hollywood writers with the WGA are on strike in New York and LA right now. Journalists at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette have been on strike for 7 months at this point. And we stand in solidarity with them. And it's important to show that solidarity because as workers on strike have told me repeatedly, one after another, whether it's striking railroad workers in France, striking industrial manufacturers here in Iowa, striking graduate workers in California, what they all tell me is that the greatest like obstacle we face is the feeling of loneliness, the feeling that people aren't behind us. Because that's when the bosses turn on the screws. When we feel alone and are made to feel alone, that's when we are most vulnerable. And so I wanted to go back around the table before we open things up to audience Q&A and ask about that part of it. So we're gonna start here and kind of snake our way back. But I was wondering if y'all could say a bit more about A, where things stand now with your respective campaigns. Y'all have kind of mentioned this a bit, but you're still fighting for contracts. Like, we can't divulge everything there, but as much as you can tell the audience, like, where do things stand now with your struggles to unionize, to get that first contract, to improve your workplaces and your lives? And B, like, what examples of solidarity have can you talk about that have helped you? Or what lessons, can we share with the audience here in the panel here about why it's so important for us to support one another and what we can do better as a community and as a movement to make sure that when workers fight, they win?
So Moms has been unionized since last summer. We won our vote overwhelmingly. It was like 4 in opposition and over 50 in favor. Right now, we're in a kind of negotiation limbo because Moms is more or less refusing to negotiate with us. They have met with us, but they've really drawn it out and will meet like once a month or so. Like, they won't really meet us regularly. And they've so far only agreed to like the absolute bare minimum, which is like discrimination policy and worker protection policy, neither of which they really hold up to. I can say from experience as a trans person that I've experienced discrimination and Moms has not dealt with it well or properly. I've experienced discrimination as a woman, as a trans woman, from managers, and there's been multiple issues of harassment. But the biggest thing people can do to support us is to come out for us. And the biggest power, especially people who are not workers have, is as consumers to put the hurt in Mom's wallet. One of the biggest things people can do is to hurt their bottom line. A big supporter also of us has been coming from Odette Ramos, who's the city councilwoman for our district. She has come out and supported us. She's come into the store with Teamsters to put pressure on Moms to negotiate with us. And that goes a long way to show the company that the public is behind us. And they only have as much power as we let them have. We are the ones who run their store, and without us, their store doesn't exist.
Yeah. As far as challenges go, I have kind of been waiting for the other shoe to drop since we dropped cards, because for the most part, what Hopkins is doing is I would describe it as like calculated passive aggression. On election day, buildings that didn't usually require ID required ID. If we have a rally, they'll put up a fence up the day afterward. Arguments over semantic differences, like language in the contract. But today, actually, this is hot off the presses, we got counter proposals, not just evasions, counter proposals. And I'm really glad that you said that certain things are the bare minimum, because I wanted to share. This is what Hopkins said no to.
How bears that minimum? Oh,
Yeah,
jeez.
This is the minimum. What we proposed on no retaliation.
Wait, speaking to the mic.
Yeah. What we proposed on no retaliation, they're not even going to consider it. What we proposed about reasonable limits on workloads, not going to consider it. Appointment security, right? Being appointed to your job for a reasonable amount of time so it's not precarious. Nope. Non-discrimination, that was supposed to be an easy one. They're not even considering it. Inclusive work environment, public safety, health and safety, right? So this is the answer that we're getting. These are the non-economic proposals, and this is the amount of pushback we're getting. It's not just about money, it's about power. And as to how average people can support, Hopkins is terrified of losing its reputation. It relies so much on this image that they've built up for it, which is made of our labor. So follow us on Twitter, ask questions in public, like, why is this such a hard sell? And as for what we as workers and organizers can do for each other, I think this is a great start. I think we should share notes, not just here, but maybe over coffee sometime, so that when it does come to a picket line, we're already friends. Yeah.
We're neighbors. So yeah, at the Baltimore Museum of Art, we're right next to Johns Hopkins. So yeah, if you need us to jump in the picket line, don't worry about it. So we're doing decently well right now. We are bargaining, and we are meeting really as often as is possible. Their lawyer is an active lawyer who also is in trial at times and things like this. So, everyone is being fair and reasonable so far, and that feels so fortunate, and it is insane that is rare, because this is inevitable. We are going to unionize. We are a union. We are going to have a contract. Let's get on with it, and let's make it normal. And let's have these shared gains. Let's have shared communication and an empowered workforce. Our institution is a place that really puts a sort of emphasis on its position in the social justice fight. And it needs to not just be public facing, it also needs to be for your own staff, right? So let's mean it. I think we're going to get there. I don't want to sound naive, but I do think that we're going to get there. And so what I recognize that I can do right now is help my friends in other organizations. So I made calls to senators to try to get the Walters to a vote. I'm not going to say my one phone call made, but just kidding. No, but there are things that, people are sharing out in social media. This is what you can do to help. It's true. If you follow on social media and see it, just make the call. It's really not that complicated. And then at the BMA in particular, if things, they don't even start to get hairy, even now, if you go in, there are visitor response cards. You can say, hey, I support your unionizing effort. That goes all the way to management. There are just ways that you can let it be known. Maybe moms can do that too, I don't know.
Yeah, so our CEO's email is on the bags at our store, so you can hound his inbox, and he may or may not respond because he's kind of a troll, but he does see those emails. We also have social media for moms workers. We're on social media too.
Yeah, those things matter. So yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, right now, like I spoke before, right now we're bargaining for our new contract. So for this one, we want to get a full contract, and we want to get caught up with the other properties. So we're having, like I say, picketing tomorrow. We want to get back and bargaining. The company, we've been able to get them on, so we've been able to get a lot of things done that they TA'd on, agreed. Right now, and our main thing is getting for the restaurant to get them to come up. So for this contract, we want no man left behind, none of us. So right now, that's where we at with their contract. If anybody can make it tomorrow at 3 o'clock, Marriott Waterfront, we'll love y'all support. It's two things you said that was very important that I want to bring up. When you talk about union organizations supporting other ones, the one thing with Unite Here, we support every union. If we know y'all have something coming up or whatever fight there, we'll show up with our red T-shirts on and we'll support it. And that's very important because the one thing about it that I learned is that we are union workers and we see y'all fight. We know you see ours, and that's one of the biggest things because just 20 of y'all could turn into 50. Can turn into 100. And when they see those numbers, that's what really scare these companies. Like, that's what really scare them. And something else you talked about as far as politics. Two of the major accomplishments we was able to do since I've been in the union is we supported Mayor Brandon Scott. So during COVID, what happened was you had companies letting go their workers during the pandemic. So we was able to get him to do the what was called the recall rights. So once it was time to bring the workers back, by law, all the hospitality companies that were union, they had to bring those workers back. So that was something that we did. That was and it wasn't just it was for the whole city. So that was a big accomplishment we made. And the second one was Larry Hogan, when he wanted to stop the stimulus money that we was getting. It's COVID, can't nobody work. He coming up talking about with people not going back to work. I mean, if the company won't let you come in the building, what is you talking about? So what we did was we took him to court and we won it. And it was able to keep going. So that was, as far as politics, we really we deep in politics. So so like I say, and you're right, we support each other unions.
It is a lot more fun going last. And I just want to agree with everything everybody else said. In terms of the struggle, I'm not going to go into a lot of details because of a clause in the election agreement. But it was tough, and there were periods where we didn't know if it was going to go through, where we didn't feel like we had any traction. And just agreeing with everybody that demonstrations of support, both internally, Walters Workers United, we kept each other going. Even when we felt very demoralized, we kept fighting and we kept working at it, and we stayed together and united. And that is how one of the reasons we got where we are today. And another one is the support. Thank you for making the call. And a lot the BMA, the Enoch Pratt, other institutions, even just general people who would come into the museum and ask how is the unionization going? That was really nice. Or write in the comment book, do you have a union yet? What's going on? Those types of things really helped keep us going and continue the fight to get to where we are now with an election agreement. So in terms of specific things for right now for us, I was promised I wouldn't be awkward about this, but I'm not succeeding. But there's a sign, and it says, I support WWU AFSCME, and you can take a picture with the sign after this, and that would be great. And then also, you were saying, follow us on social media. And continue to support each other. I also wanted to respond really quickly to something you said earlier about the perception that unions are against the workplace. And with us, everybody in Walters Workers United really likes working and doing the jobs that we're doing. The people who haven't left yet have not left because we really respond to certain aspects of the Walters mission and vision, and we want to be doing this work. For me as an accessibility advocate, that is the job I want to be doing, and the Walters is letting me do that, and I love that aspect. In addition to that, in order to continue and have sustainable people there doing the jobs and doing the work that we all want to do, we need to have a voice in the decisions that are being made, and we need to be able to come together and have that, or we're not going to be able to do that work as well. And so I think that all of the work that we've been doing is because we want the Walters to be better. We want it to continue to fulfill all of the things that, again, public facing it's saying it's going to do. And we're invested in that and we want that to happen. And it's out of care and love that we're doing what we're doing. So I just wanted to say that.
Let's give it up for our incredible panel. Woo!
I agree with that. Like, we want our jobs to be the best places they can be. Like, I love working in produce. I love doing what I do, but I want to be treated fairly and paid fairly for what I do.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah, and like y'all said, right? I mean, like, this is all of our fight, because y'all got a raise when the Trader Joe's workers unionized, right? I mean, like, that's just one of many kind of ripple effects that unionization has been proven to have. It raises the floor for everybody, right? And so the more of our fellow workers around the city who are fighting this fight, getting that contract, and the more of us who are supporting them in those struggles and making sure they get across the finish line, the more other employers around the city are going to start to take notice, and they're going to start to have to keep pace in order to attract workers to their businesses. And if they're not, the easier they are going to be to spot as the ones, who are not getting with the program, right? And so, again, I just wanted to thank our amazing panelists for sharing your stories. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to turn things over to audience Q&A in a second here, but I just wanted to ask, who here is got time at 3 p.m. tomorrow and wants to hang out at the Waterfront?
Yep,
Hell yeah.
show up.
Who here shops at Mom's and is gonna take that email address off one of the bags the next time they go? Who here is going to take a picture with the Walter Workers United sign and post it on social media? So, like, again, like, there, as we say all the time at The Real News, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something, right? And the more of us who are doing something, right, the better all of us will be. So thank you all for doing something, and thank you all for being here. Let's give it up for our incredible panel one more time. Okay, so if y'all, like, we're open for the next half hour for Q&A. We would love to hear your thoughts, your questions, and we do have a floating mic, so I want to ask two things. One, if you are going to ask a question, if you could stand on this side of the room so that Cameron, our great, yes, his name is Cameron, and he's also a great cameraman, but Cam is filming from this spot, so it's a lot easier to get the shot if you're standing over there. We have a free-floating mic, which I will bring around to you. In the meantime, I'm going to toss it to my esteemed co-host to sort of kick us off on the Q&A.
Thank you, everybody. Again, what an amazing, inspiring set of responses to everything. It's truly just energizing to hear from you all and hear about how things can move forward in a positive way. One thing that I wanted to ask about was, okay, so most of y'all here in some way or another, I would say all of you here in some way or another, work for an institution or an employer or a business, whatever, that prides itself on some sort of major mission and doing good in the world and making the world a better place, whether it's, the organic market that has a really just yells at you throughout the store about its environmental concerns, which is great, like, make people aware, yeah. But then, pays its workers $14 an hour, or it's a humongous, one of the biggest research institutions not supporting the researchers, arts museums, stewarding the great, amazing, like, imaginative works of art that we love, and providing programming for free for families. Also not treating their workers right. And then, of course, even the hospitality industry, very much related to, like, care work and making people comfortable. So I guess my question is, how does that mission drive your organizing work? And also, how do you navigate the responses from your bosses with that in mind?
We could also go like popcorn style.
Oh, yeah.
I say, can you ask the first question over again?
How does the work, like, how does the mission of your workplace inspire your organizing work? How does, yeah.
I know, I mean, it's personal, but I know if we stop, they just gonna go crazy. Like the moment you let up, you got certain people in these industries that they even feel. I'll tell you one personally. And I just found this out, that you have people within banquets that make more than their bosses. So the mentality that they have towards the workers sometimes, it's like personal. So for me, it's personal. Because if you attack a worker, or like we have 2 workers now that got terminated, and we're trying to get them renegotiated back in our contract, like we had to do that before, and we was able to do it. So it's sometimes these things become personal. You have workers that get targeted because they are outspoken, and that happened to 2 of the coworkers. So at times they do. I see people like kind of lose the fight in them, but that's why it's always good to have folks around you, and it's always good. Like one thing I always tell folks, like some coworkers, never don't go in that office by yourself. You make sure somebody's with you. Bring a coworker with you. If they call you in the office and you think it's anything with disciplinary, bring somebody with you. Get a shop steward or get a regular worker, whoever that's union. You just know that you're not alone. Some people feel so, and I understand that sometimes you kind of go into your shell sometimes, but the main thing is you have people there that's there with you. Like this, and we got an old saying, like the minute you want to stay a pack, the minute you ray off, they coming for you. They going to attack you. I mean, that's just the nature of the business. And for me, but my main thing for like what really motivate me to do it is just to see. I mean, when you see those workers so happy that you want their jobs, you and me folks that say they might say, well, I'm working here, but I don't plan on being long. And some of them do leave. Then you have some folks that they feel like, okay, I appreciate it for now, but I go to school. I'm just doing this right now while I'm in school. Then you meet people who've been there 10, 15 years. That's a career. Mm-hmm. And they make that money, and they base their whole livelihood off that money. The car, the house, everything. And to be like, to be in a position where you have no job security, I mean, you walk in one day and you gone, that's scary. That's a scary thing, like you've been there that long, and I've seen it happen to people. So that's the one thing that always motivates me, is that you have people there. And I'm one of them now, because I told you when I first started, I hated it. So I'm one of those people now, like I feel like the company owe me, and you owe everybody else. So, and like that's what it is for me. People look at that as a career. I look at it now as a career. Yeah. So that's the motivation for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. To get back to the question, also to reinforce the idea of unionizing because you want your job to be better. I see my organizing as making the institution live up to its mission. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Right? I mean, I talk a lot about the stipend, but I didn't get into research for the money. It's a terrible job to get into for the money. I got into it because I wanted to do good, meaningful research. I can't do good, meaningful research if the cold rooms have black mold in them. I can't do good, meaningful research if there's just unexplained smells of burning plastic coming from the vents. I can't do meaningful research if the AC system doesn't work, fluctuates wildly, and it doesn't let you get any work done. If I could ignore all these things and just focus on the research, maybe I would, but I can't. I really can't. And I think that a unionized workforce is going to be more productive, and it's going to rein in some of Hopkins's more predatory tendencies in the city. So I don't see them as being different things. Yeah.
I would say for me, like, in our unionizing effort, like, Moms prides itself on all these like values. they have a big giant sign of it. I think one of them is like, we rise by lifting others. And like, we as employees, like, stand by that. Like, we know that we need to support each other. And so, like, when we do that, moms freaks out. Like, if you have more than one person standing next to each other in the store, you have managers swoop in on you like a hawk. But even before we unite, especially now, they're like, what are you doing? Because they want us to look like we're being productive. And at the same time, they want to portray themselves as this great, laudable thing. But they aren't standing up to their values. And we need to hold, and we want to hold them accountable to that. You can't talk about how much important we are and how to take care of ourselves and all these things if you don't actually give us the capacity to do it.
Yeah. So working at an arts organization seems to kind of magnetize people of a certain value system, right? So by and large, most of the folks that I work with share the mission of the BMA, and that really helps, because it's like we're all sort of speaking the same language and have the same expectations. And it also makes it really clear when the organization is saying one thing publicly and then behaving internally differently, you know, when the sort of face doesn't match the body. So we are really, I don't know, we're sort of almost able to leverage the mission of the institution, and say, look, I mean, it's so clear. You can point to it and say, this is what you're claiming. Let's do this together. So yeah, in a way, it's sort of helpful. And you know, it's potentially not all malice that there are these problems in the workforce. There is no way for the workers to really sort of report up on their work experience. That's not the way capitalist systems sort of build. That's not the way this goes. So by unionizing, you create the channel to speak up and to sort of let your working conditions be known, and then also have the power to do something about it. So, yeah.
First off, just like ditto. I agree with everything pretty much everyone said. And we kind of took a similar approach to the BMA, with one of the union's main sort of talking points and goals is the DEAI initiatives that we're doing throughout the institution. And there's a section about it on the website. There's a visitor promise about just how we're all going to treat each other with respect and with kindness, and that behavior that is not in line with that won't be tolerated. And at the Walters, everyone like agrees with all of that, and we agree with that at WWU. It's great. And for us, unionizing and having that happen is extremely just in line with all of that. And we're very excited that we get to have an election and move forward with doing that.
Hell yeah. So we have the great Real News Director of Production, Kayla Rivera, over there with the free-floating mic. So if you do want to ask a question, please get her attention.
Thank you all. I'm feeling really grateful right now too, just listening to you. I'm wondering, and I feel like you've all kind of talked about the commitments that you have as a workplace. Have you entertained doing any campaigns that are bargaining for the common good? Something a bit larger that might involve the community? From my own experience, I'm coming from like a graduate student union, and we tried to force our university to confront the affordability crisis that they were causing, because like JHU, the University of Michigan was just the reason why no one could live in Ann Arbor, right? Except professors and admin. So I was wondering, you're still getting to your first contracts, but do you have dreams of using the union to wield more power in the community to push bigger issues? And if so, what kind of issues are you looking to tackle?
So for Moms, Moms Hamden is not the only store of that chain in the area. there's also 2 other stores. There's a White Marsh store and Timonium store. Timonium unionized very recently after we did. And we know that we will come out to support Timonium and they'll come out to support us. And we are trying to negotiate together as much as we can to put pressure on moms because we are working for the same company. So across the board, we can work between the 2 of them, and we're represented by the same union. So, and even other stores that aren't represented in the same union will still come out and support them because we know that what their struggle is like because we have the same struggle that they do.
Yeah, one of the planks in our platform was a deeper commitment to the city of Baltimore, something that we ran on, and is still something that we have a working group on. Tangible and specific is that we're trying to push in the bargaining as part of the contract to not have armed private police on campus, because I don't think you have to work for Hopkins to realize that them already being the biggest landlord, the biggest employer, maybe they shouldn't have a monopoly on violence in the areas they control. It's going to take a lot of effort to push back against that because it's something the university has wanted for a long time. But yeah, it's being bargained on as we speak.
Okay, I'll go. So I love that idea. I do feel a little bit like one step at a time. It's really hard. This work is really hard, and maintaining your momentum and just the will. We've had so many people that are really supportive of what we're doing, but also just kind of need to bow out for a moment and recover because it comes in waves, and it's really it's an incredible amount of work. But what I can say is that I would say cultural workers that are unionizing in force are really, in particular, supportive of other unionizing efforts and really aware. And I think that also extends to libraries in addition to museums and art spaces. So that really feels like a broader community of organization and shared support, and really just understanding the shared work experience as well. Yeah.
You brought something up, and you made me remind something that I missed later on, that how these companies kind of exploit. All right, it's one of our biggest thing, our motto for Unite Here is one job should be enough. And the thing with that is because one of the things we find out with some of these companies is the things that they're doing on the back end that you don't find out. When the union first came, we found out that Marriott, Baltimore Waterfront, was only paying $1 in taxes a year, ground taxes. And just recently, they wrote a $25 check to the city to cover their ground taxes for the next 5 years. I mean, it's crazy. So one of our main things is, like you saying, we always stress our conditions we living in the inner city. I live in West Baltimore, and it's a vacant house everywhere. So a lot of our messaging is that. And it's one of I actually helped to volunteer in a rec center in my neighborhood. Ex-football player, I don't know why, I forgot his name, that played for the Baltimore Ravens. He now run that rec center. So even I don't want to say outside the union, because you always union, but just for me, like, still participating in my community and things like that to help them. So I'm trying to do things on both ends, but that is for Unite Here, that's one of our big things, because you got a lot of workers, like, I just heard, when you live in paycheck to paycheck, you still live with your parents, things like that. That's something that that's been one of our biggest fights.
Most of, for most of the organizing since I've been here, we definitely tried to, support other unions here and there, but we were very focused on what we needed to do in that moment. It didn't feel like there was any, breathing space for doing other things. And actually, now that we have an election agreement, I would have thought it would be more work now, but it actually feels a lot more relaxed because, we have that momentum and we're moving forward and it's exciting. So I'm very excited to, be in a position where we can start thinking about those things. and start planning and just being more connected and more sort of enmesh. I'm not thinking of the right word that I want to be thinking of, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like your organizing relates to the rest of your life too. It's not separate. I think that's
Yes.
what you're...
That was. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Do we have another? Oh, hey, go for it.
Thank you for all that you've shared. I work at the Pratt Library, and we are about to start our contract negotiations soon for our first contract. One of the things that I've heard from a few of my coworkers, some stories that I've heard that have been the most inspiring to me about what workers are capable of and worker power is that in a few different situations, when a manager has left or been fired and a department is without a manager for a few weeks or a few months, the workers in that department are all so relieved on the one hand because they're not being like harassed by their manager, but also because they think, or they finally feel like, oh, we can get our work done now. And it actually, like that department actually functions in a much more healthy and effective way. And that, to me, like it makes it feel more real, like what we might be able to win if workers have more of a say in what's going on. So I wonder if any of you all have seen anything similar at your workplace, or if there's anything similar that shows up among you and your coworkers.
I got two stories. It's a saying, and I always, cause I had you always remember your bosses got bosses. That's true. Yeah, your bosses got bosses. So I had a manager tell me, cause I was this close to putting a grievance in on me. He said, "Come on, Andre, man, you know I got bosses too." Like, all right, Solomon, then work with me then. So, but I seen it happen twice after COVID. We had our director, and she was one of the main ones that was really fighting against us, like real nasty. And during COVID, they talked about money and like things. So she's a director, so they felt like we can use that money we paying you, and they got rid of her. Now she went from being a director to being a banquet manager at I believe it's the Hilton. It's either the Hilton Hyatt. It's either the Hilton Hyatt or the convention center. I believe it's the convention center. So she went from being untouchable to being in a position where the workers could put grievances in her whenever, you know, she do anything unfair or whatever the case is. And so that goes to show other managers to be humble, because the company, their bottom line is money. That's just that. And we had another manager. She was like a pit bull towards us, like definitely like she was like a pit bull towards us, because in my department, we do like all of the bulk heavy work. We set up the stages and do all that, so event services. But I had a personal conversation with her. She told me, she said she thought she had to do that, but I believe the company put that in her head. Well, we haven't seen her since last year, and we still haven't got no explanation. Because towards the end of her being terminated, she started becoming more friendly with us, and she started getting aggravated with the company. And she just disappeared. Now she went from being our manager, she's now a cook at one of our other properties, and now she's a union member. Tell me how, ain't that crazy? So yeah, that's that. But I tell you all the time, just remember your bosses have bosses. As the workers, the best thing y'all could do is just fight back. Don't allow for your boss to let his boss put the pressure on him where he's going to put the pressure on y'all. Y'all fight back. And you're going to see them days, you're going to see just how different the mentality with them come. They're going to have their days, but it'll be a much smoother experience when you start doing that, you start fighting back.
Also, like for us, like there's a huge manager rotation that Moms does. So managers get transferred in and out all the time. That's part of their policy, is they move managers around, which is to their benefit because it means employees don't trust the managers. But that also makes sure, like, we know that the managers there are managers who are awful and who are problems. But by and large, like, they're just trying to do a job as much as we are. Our issue is with the company, not the people who are directly in charge of us, because they also deal with the same kind of stuff that we do. Grocery managers, produce managers, we have our own bosses, and we get told to do things like produce labor gets cut all the time. Like my manager and I yesterday, between the two of us, worked a late truck. It took us, between the two of us, to set up the entire produce department, which with like an hour to go. I didn't sit down for my break until 11:30. I come in at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, because like someone has to do it and he has to do the order. So, because we don't have labor, I'm not mad at him, I'm mad at moms for cutting labor in our department because they think that they don't need the labor across the entire chain, but they cut labor in one of the busiest stores in the chain.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. My manager is personally very nice, so like, thank you for being nice, Colleen, if you're listening to this, which you probably aren't. But anyways, but I have actually noticed something similar to what you're saying, and I think that in the context of the museum I work at, it's more like bureaucracy than it is any individual manager, where there are a lot of systems in place, and you have to sort of go to like 8 different people before a thing can get done. And some of that is like necessary and important, but also like some of it might not be. And one thing I'm excited about with the potential for unionization is being able to give that feedback and have those conversations to talk about systems. And like, maybe it needs to be like that for a reason and we just don't know about it because we weren't told. But being able to be in that room and have that conversation will like know why things are the way they are and maybe get closer to changing them if they're not working and there isn't a reason why they are that way.
Yeah, I would say that our experience is pretty different, but touches on a lot of the same ideas. The idea of, for example, if you don't like your job, quit and get another one, doesn't apply at all. Because what happens is you join a lab and you're effectively married to a person for the length of the degree of the PhD, and that person controls your career trajectory after that. But the thing is, the way it's split up is we do the experiments, and our immediate bosses, the principal investigators, their job is really to get and secure funding. The beef we have is really with our bosses' bosses. Those are the people that are saying that we don't need non-discrimination clauses. Our bosses are scrambling to keep their labs funded year to year, and they're under a lot of pressure. But you have to pick a good boss and hope you got lucky. I don't think that you should have to get lucky to get through a career. And I think that our bosses, even the good ones, when they feel pressure coming from up top, they take the easy way out and they push that pressure down. They don't push up against it because it's hard. But that means we have to. And we have, and we're going to keep doing it. But I wouldn't say that it's fundamentally changed things at that level yet. But it's made a whole lot of conversations possible that weren't possible before. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, at my museum, again, I would say our struggle is not with individual managers so much as it's the sort of culture of the institution. There are real issues for folks that are working in the front of the house with pay and working conditions. And people in the back of house, I mean, most of us are regularly working 12 to 14 hours a day, working most weekends just to try to manage. Front of house workers, we've extended our museum hours so that one day a week we're open till 9 p.m. and then every other day right now, especially in wedding season, there's an event of some sort. Well, you know, folks are having to work that, and I mean having to work that. Someone has to be there. So they are sometimes working a shift until 1 in the morning for a wedding, say, and then they have to be there at roll call at 9 a.m. and if they are 2 minutes late, they get written up. So, we're working on it. We're working on it. We'll get there. But that's how it is right now. And so, that's not one manager. That's the culture of the entire institution, and that is why we're fighting.
Oh yeah. So I think we're nearing the end, but we got time for I think one more question. Do we have one up there? Yeah. So let's throw it in there.
My name is Anita Bass. I'm the union president for Baltimore County Public Library. And I'm here to listen to you all, and I am so proud of how brave you are. We are under our second contract, and it has been difficult. I can tell you that. My question to you is, how are your workers when you're approaching them now at the stage that you're at? Are they still afraid to talk about the union, or do they feel more empowered?
I think for moms, our biggest hurdle is turnover. Especially jobs like grocery store jobs, there's a lot of turnover. So there are a core group of people who have been around for a number of years, longer than I have worked at Moms. Some people have been there for 15 years. I know a lot of people who have just recently got hired, may have gotten a job there because they heard it was unionizing, may have gotten a job just after we voted. And so we have to try to get them on board with it. And that's really challenging because we have limited opportunity to get everyone together because of how many employees there are and how many different shifts there are. I work the AM shift. I know no one really in the night shift. So it's hard to communicate between those two, but we're trying our best to get people together. We try to have meetings with our employees to get everyone in the same room and to let them know what's going on. One recently that I went to, I think it was several months ago, was one at Red Emma's who let us use their space after they were closed so we could meet with everyone and to get everyone updated, because I think we're not allowed, as far as I'm aware, I think legally we're not allowed to talk about union business on the clock. So the space that we have when we're all in the same room, we can't use. So we have to meet outside and figure out how to get everyone together.
We actually are able to talk about union business on the clock, just managers can't talk to us about it. But it's not like it is our right to unionize, and so discussing it is not a problem. And so one of the things it is really extremely irritating to me is that we have recently been told that we are not allowed to use email or any of the sort of communication methods of the institution for any sort of union conversation or business. So I can't send a calendar invite to my colleagues, which is how many of us sort of live and breathe. So that causes that sort of feeling of needing to operate in the shadows, feeling like this needs to be a secret. And there are still people. We now are a union, and we, it was a very forceful vote, 89 to 29. And yet still there are folks who are afraid and who are nervous about retaliation. And, those fears are not unjustified. And we also are struggling with turnover again because of that pace. So it's, a lot of, this is the culture of work right now.
It's a lot of long-term things, and it's exhausting. A lot of us are burnt out trying to maintain this. Yeah. But we have to keep doing it and have to do what we can to make sure everyone's on board and everyone knows about it.
To answer that question, for me at the Marriott, because we got it's a big building, you get a little bit of everything. You get folks that's excited. You get folks that's still in a fight. You get the usual suspects that's going around lying about, with the union because they want to be buddy with management. You get some folks that don't know what's going on because they probably just started, or they so incognito, the building's so big, you got to go around and try to find them and everything. So you get a little bit of everything. The main thing is for us is when we find, to be able to single out each department and make sure you got at least 2 or 3 good leaders in that department that can keep those folks, keep talking to them. Hey, you okay? Even make a phone call sometimes and things like that. So we get a little bit of everything, but for the most part, it's in good spirits right now. But one of the things we're dealing with, we starting to notice it's a lot of new like temps coming in. So we understand what they're doing right now. But just to answer your question, it's a little bit everything. So like one of our things is making sure like you got good leaders in each department, because we got a big building. So you're trying to make sure good like tomorrow, trying to get a good turnout. But so you got to go to so many different departments and shop stores, talking to shop stores. Hey, you talk to such and such, you talk to such and such. So that's one of the things. It's just trying to keep that momentum. That's the work. Like, that's the hard work, trying to keep that momentum going. Like, that is a job. You know, sometimes you just want to lay at home and get a drink and chill. And, you know, like, but sometimes my organizer president call me, hey, Andre, can you call these 5 people for me? I'm like, sure, let me call them. Because that quick 20 minutes to call those workers make a big difference. So that's, to me, just keeping that momentum. But I understand where people coming from. Like, you know, some people feel like they get burnt out, whatever the case is. But like I say, for us, it's a big building, so I get a little bit of everything.
I can go. Yeah, I was going to say, I think that, like, again, since getting the election agreement, I feel like the mood has kind of shifted a little bit, and we have momentum now, which is exciting. And like there is a clear sort of step forward. And so I feel like because it was like a 2-year like struggle to get to this point, like there were people who were like very involved at the beginning who maybe took steps back and are now coming back. And I feel like just having that, I agree completely with you about the whole momentum piece is very big. I also think that sometimes, like, one thing that's been helpful, at least for me, is being able to take breaks and then come back and just being very honest and communicating with each other about like how we're doing. And like with the organizing committee, I've noticed that like certain people are very involved in certain aspects and other people are involved in different aspects. And like having that sort of freedom to, if I'm like having a chronic illness flare one week and I'm not able to like do things, that's okay, and that there are people who will be able to cover for that, and I'll cover for other people when they need me to do that. That sort of feeling is very helpful for like just not getting burnt out and keeping that momentum. And so that's something that's been very helpful personally for me, and I think for the other members of the OC.
I would say that we have the same level of support as we did back in January, just not the same level of energy. I walk up to a person in a lab, they're still happy to see me. Hey Martin, how's it going? Is this a true thing? Are we talking about true right now? Okay, great. Like, you got something for me to sign? Okay, yeah, sure, cool. Getting a raise yet? Oh, okay, see you in 2 weeks. Right, that's what the conversations become. And that's fine. I mean, not everybody has to be on all the time. But our grad student culture is very much sprint towards a deadline, and then once you're past that deadline, move on to a different project. But the project's not over. It's a constant conversation. It's uphill sometimes, but the support's still there.
Oh yeah. So we're gonna wrap things up here because I want to let y'all go, and you've been so generous with your time and your stories, and I can't thank y'all enough. Can't thank you all enough for sticking with us, for listening, for your great questions. And I can't thank our Real News crew enough for all of their incredible work behind the scenes to set this up. Thank you to everyone. Just 2 quick things I wanted to say. First off, again, the Real News Network is a viewer-supported nonprofit media network. We want to do more events like this. We want to make this space what the community needs it to be. We want to use our journalism and our media-making capacities to help our fellow Baltimoreans and our fellow working people in Baltimore and beyond in their struggles. So if you have stories that you think we should cover or ideas for events, please reach out to us. Please watch, read, share our work. If you are able to, please support our work, which you can do at therealnews.com/support. But on top of that, I wanted to just sort of like end on a quick like rapid fire round around the table. So it's just gonna be just like a couple lines about like what you would say to people in the city who are maybe considering unionizing, or who are maybe, considering speaking up at their job, right? Or going to their manager and collectively as a group and having certain issues addressed, right? I'm going to ask y'all if you just had like some final words about what you would say to them and where they should get started, right? But just like before we get there, I just wanted to sort of like talk about the why, right? Why we should do that, right? Because I think it was just so clear in all of your stories and even the ones that we're seeing represented here in the audience. Like, I'm so grateful to hear from other union folks in the audience, including folks that we have interviewed and covered here at The Real News, like Pratt Workers United. Shout out to them. I remember when I was talking to a couple of the worker organizers in that campaign here at the studio a couple months ago. It was the great Antoinette Wilson, I believe, who looked at me and was talking to me about why workers there were unionizing. And Antoinette had been there for many years. And she said something that just stuck with me. She said, I've worked here for, 20 years, and it just feels like the love is gone. And I feel like that's the best line I could give to draw a through line in all the interviews that I do, right? Like I said, I speak to workers in the US and beyond week in, week out. And I think that is the general vibe that I hear from everybody, is that as a society, at our jobs, the love is gone. The love is going away, right? It's being taken away. The job that we liked is becoming more intolerable because we're being chronically understaffed, right? The people that we loved working with are being fired. The managers who treated us well are replaced. And then we suddenly realized how much of our situation was dependent upon getting lucky, like you said, with having one good manager who could be that easily replaced. COVID showed all of us how much unilateral power our bosses have to push us into unsafe working conditions, to give us quote unquote hero pay, and then rip that shit away 2 weeks later without any say-so from the rank and file, right? Or like we said, a store could be summarily closed without any prior notice. Workers can get fired en masse without severance, right? I think just as things continue to get worse in this country, as the quality of life, the quality of consumer experience, the quality of workplace experience just gradually deteriorates, as that love dissipates more and more. I think the real question for all of us is like, what are we going to do about it, right? Because clearly the people in power are not just going to step in and make it all better, right? And so I think like, we're both in a very dire moment, but I think the kind of perpetual source of hope that the labor movement gives is that working people will never just lie down and take it, right? Whether we're talking about, overthrowing the slavery of the people who built the pyramids in Egypt, to the people who built this country, right? To all of the workers who are still underrepresented and overexploited all across this country and beyond, like, we will never stop fighting. And again, I just wanted to thank everyone here so much for fighting that good fight. And I wanted to ask y'all as a final quick rapid fire turn around the table, if there are folks watching this around the city, other fellow workers working at cultural institutions or doing service industry work, or maybe they work at a university or anywhere else, what would your message be to them about like if they were thinking of organizing, what would you say to them and where would they get started? And why should they do it?
So I would say that like the rights we have as a society, we only have so long as we keep fighting for them, because there will always be political forces that will take those rights away. I know that as a trans person, that my rights are to this very moment being questioned in so many states across the board. But as people, we are always more powerful together than we are when we are not together. So unions have some of the best capacity to fight for labor rights because they speak for the workers, not just a single worker.
I would say if you're thinking about this, it's because the other way didn't work. It's because suffering in silence didn't work. It's because trying to be friends with the right boss didn't work. You have more in common with your coworkers than you think, and your bosses have less power over you than you think.
I would say to be brave and to just trust that you'll get to a point where it feels really, really normal to have your union.
Yeah, I would say dignity and respect. That was the first thing for me when I got in the union. Like, to be able to wake up every morning and have that dignity and respect for yourself first. And I mean, if you want to start somewhere as far as joining, you can go. I was on social media, Unite Here Local 7. I'm pretty sure she showed them sign. You can see the sign. She got the sign going. You can start. They here. You can start there. Of course, I know y'all got the information for the folks. But yeah, we with us, we even have and for anybody here in the audience or anybody, Unite Here, we have an apprenticeship program that you can join. They train you, get you ready, put you straight into a union job. So if anybody interested, you can get in contact or go on Facebook, Unite Here Local 7, and you can get started there.
First piece of practical advice, document. Second, I agree with everything that's said. I think finding a sort of larger union that you can be a chapter in, like I wouldn't know any of the things I know now, or be able to do any of the things I'm doing without the support of AFSCME and also of my coworkers. So my final thing is just talk to your coworkers, and have those conversations, and start small and then build, and create that sort of group of people who are fighting for the same things.
Yeah, just do it.
And on that note, let's give it up one more time for our incredible panel. Thank you all so much for the Real News Network. This is Maximillian Alvarez signing off. Yeah, stay strong, solidarity forever. Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.